Our oral history series continues, and we have a fine guest for this next program, Nina McWaters of Benton. She's a young lady. We'll ask her age in a minute. I don't know if she'll tell us or not, but I think she's at least 75, maybe even older than that. I'm Ray Mofield. Shelby McCallum will also be interviewing. It's the WCBL Oral History Series presented for the Marshall County Library, the State Archives in Frankfort, and the Murray State University Pogue Oral History Library. As I said, our guest for this 30 minutes is Nina McWaters. Miss McWaters, how old are you? Do you ever tell that?
92.
92. Well, I remembered that because you were marshal of the Tater Day Parade, and they printed it in the paper.
Mm-hmm.
And there you
so you
came.
couldn't keep it any longer. Had to tell it.
All right, I know you have some wonderful memories of your lifetime here in the county. First of all, were you born here?
Yes, sir.
Who were you before you married?
I was a White.
A Wyatt.
Mm-hmm.
Are you related?
Still a few Whites around.
Yes, there are a good many in the county. Are you related to Rayburn Watkins in any way?
He is my nephew. My
All right.
real nephew. His mother was my sister.
Well, that is wonderful. Of course, I believe your sister died at when Rayburn was relatively young, and I know Gip married Nellie, and I knew her, of course, as Rayburn's stepmother. I didn't know your sister. But your family, do you remember anything about your parents?
Oh, yes.
And their names were?
Well, I always called him Little Rabe White, and Fanny Ellen, and my mother was a stringer that lived around Hardin. You heard of John Stringer, I guess.
Yes, I surely
he
have.
was my grandfather.
Now, do you remember both grandparents on both sides of the family?
Sure do.
Would you tell us who they were?
Well, my grandfather White lived out in the country, and he had 8 children, and he gave them all a homestead surrounding him.
He must have been a fairly wealthy man.
Well, he owned all the land around him, and he gave each one of them a place to build a house or to live, and we all grew up together, all 8 of us. And that was out here, well, it's on the other side of Brownsburg. We was 4 miles of Brownsburg. Brownsburg was our post office.
Yes. Do you know very much about the genealogy of these families? Did they come from here, from Virginia, or
Really,
maybe?
no, I don't.
What about further back than that? England, Wales, Ireland, Scotland?
Some of them came from, I think the Stringers came from somewhere, but I really don't know. I don't know about either one.
All right, where did you go to school, Miss Nina?
I went to Benton School. Oh, the first school, you mean in the country?
Yeah.
Oh, we lived out in the country, and we had country schools, you know, teacher for every school.
Oh, I went to a one-room
And
country school and graduated from one.
Yeah, my school was named White Oak.
Well, what was that close to? Was it near Bryansburg?
4 miles of Brownsburg on the other side, off of the road.
I know Marshall County at one period had about 56 or 7, I believe, one-room country schools. So White Oak was one of them.
That's where I grew up, in that White Oak School.
And you graduated then from that in the 8th grade.
8th grade, and
you could
and I become a teacher.
reading and writing and arithmetic, and you knew it well. I was a little surprised at that when I was growing up, hearing the story that you could just finish the 8th grade, you went to the county seat, you took an examination,
That's right.
and if you made a certain percentage on each test, you were able to start teaching.
They called them certificates. You made a first class, second, and third class. First class lasted 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I made the first class, and I taught 4 years in the country schools in the county.
That's where Rayburn got all of his smartness, wasn't it?
Oh, I suspect it is. What sort of curriculum did they have? What did they teach? What kind of books did they use? This famous.
Well, just from
McGuffey's Reader?
McGuffey's Reader, the first grade up to the 8th grade.
Now I remember a book that I started in the first grade with. I still got it. It was called Baby Ray. Does that ring a bell with you?
No, not really.
Baby Ray had a dog. Baby Ray had a cat. Okay.
I remember once there were 3 bears.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
On the book subject, I haven't asked this question to anybody else, but I know I have a lot of old books that belong to my parents, all of like Charles Dickens' works and Mark Twain's works. What kind of books generally did the general public read in those days?
well, they didn't. Way back then, just the school books is about all I knew.
Is that all they had?
Yeah.
They didn't have any access to any.
Well, I don't remember anything.
How about magazines?
Not much magazines were printed way back then.
Well, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Not much. Mm-mm. And the only source I had when I was going to school is the books they furnished you, the books that
I
was
see.
put out for the students. And I finished 8th grade, and as was said, we had to go to the county seat and take an examination and make a certificate before we could teach school.
Mm-hmm. Well, you didn't have to have college at that time.
No.
And, the legislature didn't demand a high school in each Kentucky county till 1909. So that was, Marshall County Benton became a high school.
I have an idea. I don't know if it's correct or not. That perhaps the 8th grade in those days was tougher to complete than the 8th grade is today.
Well, I guess it was. I imagine it was.
There's no doubt about it, Shelby. No doubt whatsoever.
Yeah, well.
They didn't have Sandbox 1 and 2, and in those days.
Yeah.
Or driver education and a lot of other things. You concentrated on reading, writing, and arithmetic, and they could do those real well. Of course, the expanded curriculum may be better in many ways, but for years, many people are stunned, for example, to learn that Harvard University didn't have an English department till 1872. And the reason they didn't, the name of the country schools was grammar schools.
Yeah.
They didn't call them elementary then. They called them grammar
I
schools.
remember that.
And so you knew the language.
Yeah.
And when you went to high school, the first high school was organized a year before Harvard, in 1635, and it was Boston Latin. And so everybody went to high school to learn Latin, and then they went to college to learn Hebrew and Greek. And modern foreign languages. So they didn't need to study English, nor did they need to study Latin in college in those days. So that tells you something about the level of the elementary schools.
Yeah.
And of course, McGuffey's readers had no control of vocabulary. Now you buy a book and it'll say, we guarantee that they only use 100 words in this book, let's say. And that the most complicated one is cat.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't true in McGuffey's readers. You ran into the words of the Bible and Shakespeare, and when you got through, you knew a little bit, didn't you?
Sure did.
Well, that's fine. All right, you finished there, and how long did you live in that area and teach? Did you teach back at White Oak?
No, I didn't teach at that. I taught it 4 different places. I taught at Union Ridge, and that was the last one I taught, and then I got married.
Was that sort of out on the Jonathan Creek area?
Yeah,
Yes.
way up there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
East of Hardin.
Just down a little piece where the churches are now. There's 2
Yes, sir.
churches there.
Yes, sir.
Well, it's down the road from that little piece. And I taught at Stice. Now that was over in the Tatumville area.
Yes.
And I taught at Stall. Well, you know where the Stalls live, down on the highway down there. Well, just in the area of Kentucky Made.
Yes.
That way.
Uh-huh. That's
See-
sort of Palma, just
Uh-huh, down
not too
that
far
way.
from Palma.
And then Birmingham, the last school I taught was at Birmingham, and they had 2 teachers there then.
Big school.
It was a big school,
Mhm.
and Mr. Wade was the principal, and I had the lower grades.
Do you remember any of the school superintendents back then that you
Oh,
could name?
Mr. Harvey Jones is one. I don't remember how far back it was now that he was. And who could I think of next?
Well, we don't want to tie you down to dates necessarily unless you remember them right offhand.
I
But
can't think right now.
all right, what were your big problems in teaching? Did you have a lot of discipline problems then, or did you have to get a hickory switch after some of the boys?
Well, I did once at Union Ridge School, and it was hard too, I tell you. A great big old boy, bigger than I was, a great big boy, and he just wanted to sort of take over, you know, and I had to call in the trustees, and somebody sort of straighten him out.
Mm-hmm.
They told him if he couldn't behave and try to study at school, he could just stay home, and I think he got where he just stayed
Of course,
home.
you were a fairly small woman. I remember Van Ratliff's sister telling me once, she was a big, husky
Yeah.
lady, that she just got a boy down and put her knee across his throat and like killed him.
Yeah,
Beat him nearly to death, and his dad came out and got mad about it, and she told him, said, well, I'll whip you just like I did your son. And so he left.
Well,
But some of those things, I guess, were pretty interesting. Well,
Yeah.
did they ever bring you apples? Apple
oh,
for
yeah.
the teacher?
Yeah, they did that. Huh?
So some of them
Some
were
of
real nice.
Yeah, some of them liked me, some didn't, I guess. That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
Everybody
What
does.
was the favorite subject that you liked to teach?
Geography.
Geography.
Mhm.
That was always one of my
I
favorite
liked
subjects.
geography, but history was clear out, because I hated to remember dates.
Well, Shelby could use a few people from time to time, and so could we who know a little bit about geography. Sometimes they don't know South America from Africa.
That's right. Do you remember things of historical importance, like what you were here? Do you remember when the first railroad came through?
Well, I don't know whether I do or not. When was it? Do you know?
No, I don't.
I don't.
I just wondered what impact that had on me.
Well,
It had a great impact because I remember way back then when we had big singing, we'd rush over here to meet the trains down at the depot see the people get off who come to the big singing.
Yeah. Has big singing changed very much, in your opinion?
Oh yeah, it's well, the singing part of it really hasn't, but the way people come,
It's become a shorter,
yeah, more of
abbreviated.
a county-wide thing than it is. Well, we have a few people who come from out of.
they ran special trains at one
Yeah,
time.
they did, and
Mhm.
people would go down there to meet the train to see the people get off to come to the big singing, and they'd march up that street up to the courthouse, you know, from the depot. You remember the old depot?
Oh yes, I certainly do, and you're right. It
And
was
I lived out in
quite
the country way back then too, and I
Well-
like to get over here in time to see the train.
Yeah.
was a social event to see the train come
Yeah.
through. There's a story about Hardin, may have been apocryphal, but possibly was true. A fellow told me once that he was on a train going to Hardin, and some traveling person who had never been through before, when the conductor called out Hardin, he just said, well, what's the population of Hardin? And the conductor says, I don't know, but you can count them. They'll all meet the train. And that was very nearly true in those days. So big singing was a big day, and of course, even older than that started in 1884, and even older, 1843 was Tater Day. Was it quite a whiz bang when you were young?
Yeah, children used to come and they'd get, of course, we had no cars way back then, you know, when I was first coming to Taylor Day, and my daddy'd get us all in the wagon, you know, and we'd come to Taylor Day.
Now, you didn't have to worry about missing school back then
No.
because
Everybody come to Taylor.
there was 5-month term for some of those years, and then they finally got it up to 7. But school always ended before first Monday in April,
Yeah.
so you didn't have to worry about
No,
missing.
that's
Now,
right.
when I was in school, they had a so-called 9-month term,
Mm.
and we'd skip school on
Yeah, and
Taylor
come to
Day.
Taylor Day. Well, they might as well dismiss it for Taylor Day because everybody was coming anyway.
Well, they're doing that now.
Yeah,
They're just
yeah.
recognizing it and putting it in the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what your first paycheck was when your first teaching term?
No, really, I don't. But of course, I had to board in that district because we had no cars, no way of going and coming, and I had to board there, and of course had to pay board. I don't even remember how much board. I know when I taught school down at Stall, I boarded at Mr. Hawk Oakley's, if you remember him, the Oakleys that lived on.
Do you remember where you paid anywhere you stayed?
No, I really don't, but not much.
You could probably room and board for a whole month for maybe $10 or so.
Yeah, that's about right. I think about $10. I don't remember, but it
And
wasn't much.
your
because-
salary probably
but the
was
salary wasn't much either.
about $40 a month, maybe.
Yeah, I guess so.
One person told me that his first salary in teaching along about that same period was
Yeah.
$40 a month.
That's right.
Well, I can recall 1933, I was in school at Stone, and Otho Winchester was the teacher, and he made $55 a month. I thought he was the richest man on earth. But, of course, that wasn't very much.
Times have changed. People make that much in one day in less time.
Now, you were, of course, married, and your husband was?
I married the last school I taught,
Uh-huh.
1911.
1911.
Mm-hmm.
And how long did you and your husband get to live together?
20 years.
Right.
He died in 61.
1961.
Doesn't seem to be that long.
No, it
When you
doesn't.
think about it.
Now, he was interested in horses, as
Yeah.
I remember.
Died at a horse show in Paducah.
Yeah.
Just showed his horse and come in and sat down.
Did you share that interest that he had in horses?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I look forward to the day to come that we'd go to Paducah or Murray or wherever.
This question may or may not be relevant to this program, but there's a cemetery I think on your property, and we, at one time when we were going to put the cable vision in, we discussed with your daughter briefly about putting it there. It turned out that we couldn't put the tower that close to the radio station because of what did they call it, Ray? Engineering name.
Well,
Anyway, it
caused interference,
Yeah.
of course. But
Anyway, do you have any idea about who those people are who are buried up there?
I know several, yeah.
Your daughter was not aware. She said
No,
I just think that's unusual.
Mr. Solon Palmer was cashier of the Bank of Benton for years and years.
I've heard of him.
And he and his wife are buried up there.
Is that right?
And Joe Dicus, his mother and daddy's buried up
see.
there, Mr. and Ms. Dicus.
Uh-huh.
And there's a family named Cooper's buried up there. I happen to know that, their daughter who was, I don't remember whether she was buried there, but her parents were. And then there's some Smiths buried up there, but I really know
But
who
the
they are.
cemetery is more or less neglected.
Yeah, it really is. It makes me
Um,
sick. I'll go up there every summer and just, you can't hardly get through it for the
I'm
home.
surprised that a person as prominent as Mr. Palmer was that they would not have picked a more.
Well, and what he should have done is left a lot of his money to the upkeep of that graveyard
Oh yeah.
in place of.
Well, now the reason I brought up cemeteries, there is a cemetery. Now I don't know if you know anything about this. That Toad Bryan told me about that behind the Benton elementary school and they had no record of any of the people who were buried in it. So they finally just decided to pave over it. And did you know that
No, I don't know about that.
he said that there were a number of graves back there, and they theorized that way back under that a wagon train might have been coming through, and there might have been a massacre or something. But nobody knew, so they just that's.
I tell you, they've forgotten there was well, this may be off the beam, but I started to say about this graveyard that out there by Lakeland Parish, there was a lady in Paducah came out to my house one day and wanted me to go with her out there to try to find
That's
some
out near Aurora?
no, out there, you know where Lakeland Parish is, out here on the road going towards Aurora.
That's what I meant, yeah.
Yeah, just
yeah.
not
I know
real
where
far
it is.
out.
Sure, I know where it is.
Well, there's a graveyard back there,
Uh-huh.
and there hadn't been anybody buried there in years and years and years, but I know of quite a few people that was buried there.
When you and your husband first married, what did he do to make a living then? Did he farm?
He was was in the contracting business.
A contract?
I mean, he worked for a contractor and then finally went into business himself, you know.
Uh-huh.
And that's what he did till he retired. He built a number of schoolhouses and residences and different things in the county.
When did you move to Benton?
And let's see, Martha Ellen she went to her first school in Benton when she was 6 years old. I believe we moved to Benton
25?
in 19 and 18, I believe it was.
Mhm. What was Benton like in 1918?
Well,
Do you remember any of the stores or
oh, yes, I do.
streets were paved? Or
No, they weren't paved, and they. I remember different stores that were there then when we moved. That, of course, they are gone now. Strauss clothing store and H.P. McElrath store and.
Strauss and McElrath. Now, there's two names I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of those people through Dr. Faust, as you
Yeah.
know. I was a
Yeah,
friend of
Dr.
his.
Faust. He was my dentist, and
He described some of the changes. The electric system was less than could be desired, I believe, at that time, wasn't it?
yeah, not very.
They had an old generator for a while, and then Tennessee Light and Power took over in 1929, I believe it was.
Well, I don't remember.
29 or 30. Anyway, when they built the highway from Murray to Paducah and on to
For a
Hazel.
while now, it was an Iowa outfit. Now, how it got down here, I don't know, but it was Central States.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I don't know, there were several changes there. There was
For
Dr.
sure
Crawford built the first plant in Murray, and then, of course, they finally went out. And maybe
How about water and sewage? And when did that come to be?
Well, I don't know when it came, but we sure didn't have any, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure you didn't.
No, but I really don't know.
I think Miss Margaret Heath told me that water was installed in 29, but that sewers were sometime after
yeah,
that.
it was. Uh-huh. You had to take care of your own sewage.
Mhm. So Benton has changed a great
Has-
deal. Now there was a Heath store, was
Yeah,
there?
Margaret's father had a store up there on the corner.
Oh, yeah, we remember.
What about was there a Crawford Ferguson?
Yeah, owned the store where
The National store is now.
Crawford and
Yeah.
Ferguson used to be that.
Edgar Ferguson.
Mm-hmm. And Crawford, I think he lived out of town, but I don't
Yeah, he
remember
did.
who he was.
Well, what are some of the funny things that you can remember when you moved to town? Did the neighbors come out and help you set up housekeeping? And
Well, they was real nice. The old lady that lived across the street from me, of course she's dead and gone a long time ago. I forgot now what her name was, and she was just real nice to me because at that time she was a whole lot older than me, and she wanted to help take care of me. That we just moved to town and getting Martha Ellen in school, you know, that was her first school. Why, of course, the teachers and different ones were real nice to help us out, and we first started to the Methodist Church, of course, and that's where we've been all these years.
When you moved to town, Mr. Lemon was still publishing the Tribune, the fellow that started the Big Scene. Did
Big
you ever see
Scene.
him?
I don't remember so much about him, but I remember his brother that lived out here in the country.
Well, now, one of his
Yeah.
brothers, Scott, became mayor of Mayfield.
Yeah, he did.
And up until what seems to me just a few years ago, he was always master of ceremonies at Big Singing.
Hmm.
At least he would.
Now, this Lemon that lived here in the county, his name was George Lemon, you see. He lived out close to Brownsburg, and he was one of them.
What have been your hobbies over the years? Are you interested in quilts?
Yes, I have
patchwork
been.
quilts?
I made a many a quilt and crocheted many a afghan. I made afghans and quilts for all my, well, I said my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren now.
You can get about as much for one of those patchwork quilts now as a farm
They
used to
say
cost.
you can.
Have you sold any?
I haven't sold any. I give mine away.
And you've been a volunteer worker in a lot of civic things. Haven't you helped out at the hospital?
Oh, yes, and this is my pin I got from the governor for that. And I've been working volunteer work ever since the hospital opened in 1964.
Mhm.
And that was right after Bob died, and I went over there and offered myself if there's anything I could do by time was so, not occupied, and I needed something to do. And before they ever had auxiliary anything, they just said, well, stand around here by the nurse's station, and when we have anything we can let you do, we'll call on you. And we,
I remember the day the hospital opened.
hmm
The day before, or that day perhaps, 2 or 3 tornadoes came through Marshall County.
Mm.
And it's a classic example of bureaucracy. The hospital board at Frankfort had not officially inspected and approved the hospital.
March the 4th, 1964.
That's when it opened.
At that time, I happened to be Speaker of the House.
Mhm.
So one of the doctors, I believe it was Dr. Miller, I'm not sure, said we need to open this hospital. And they have told us it can't be opened until it's inspected. And he says, is there anything you can do? And I said, well, I'll call you back. I went downstairs, the legislature was in session, and I went in the governor's office, and the governor said, I am utterly shocked and surprised they would even ask. he says, call them back and tell them to open it.
Well, I went to work right then
Yeah.
in 1964, and I have hardly missed a Wednesday since then going to that hospital to work.
I've seen you there many times.
Every Wednesday is my day, and I go.
That's wonderful. You've been very devoted. I am glad that I could contribute a little. At one time I was on the board. In fact, I was chairman of the board for a while. And I think it was a great addition to our community.
It is.
Those who
It
worked
certainly
hard to get it
It is.
should be
And
greatly honored.
we have
along
a
with-
very efficient, good auxiliary who donate their time
I know you do.
to helping out over there, you see.
Well, 30 minutes has gone in a hurry. We only have about 1 minute left. Do you have a final word for us?
Well, I certainly have enjoyed meeting with you gentlemen and enjoyed telling you what I know about things that have passed. I've had a real good life. I have no complaints, and I'm still having a good time.
You may make it to 100.
Well, she will. I want to ask her one question I've tried to ask everyone. If you had your life to live over again, would you pick Marshall County as the choice place that
I
you would
think
like
I
to live?
would.
Well, everyone that we've interviewed has agreed.
And there's just one thing in my life that I'd change if I had my life to go over. I would be determined to learn how to drive a car.
That would be
Well,
convenient, wouldn't
Yes,
it?
sir. I had a wreck when I bumped into somebody else. When I tried to drive, well, that just threw me off, and I never tried anymore.
Well, thank you very much, Miss Nina McWaters, citizen of Benton, 92 years old, who has given you the last 30 minutes of an interview for the Oral History Project, funded by WCBL Radio and Shelby McCallum, who was one of our interviewers today. I'm Ray Mofield, and these tapes will be on deposit at the Benton Library, the State Archives in Frankfort, and Murray State University Pogue Oral History Library. And that's our program for today.
Well, now, has this been